Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Attorney General. Although you have been in office for 15 months, this is your first time testifying before the subcommittee. Last year, you broke tradition by refusing to appear before us, the first time in decades that an Attorney General declined to appear before this committee. I would note that during the same period, you managed to testify before the authorizing committees, as well as the Senate Intelligence Committee. Suffice it to say, you are operating with a deficit of goodwill on this side as a result. Unfortunately, this treatment has been par for the course in this committee's dealings with the administration. Just recently, the department ignored clear direction from Congress by bringing to an end the legal orientation program and the immigration court help desk programs. As announced yesterday, it appears that your views on this subject have changed, but I remain concerned that such an action was contemplated despite clear instructions from this committee. That announcement was just one in a long line of troubling actions taken by this department and this administration to undermine fairness, due process, and civil rights in this nation. The announcements of the past 16 months are almost too many to comprehend. Efforts to undermine public safety in sanctuary cities by reducing law enforcement funding, attempts to impose case quotas on our immigration judges, proposing to eliminate the community relations service in this year's budget, ending police, community, collaborative reform efforts. The list goes on and on. A clear theme emerges from all of this, an intentional effort to minimize and ignore the concerns of large segments of the American population, minorities, immigrants, LGBTQ community, and those that have suffered discrimination in this country. For generations, the Department of Justice has been at the forefront of the fight to prevent discrimination and to uphold the constitutional values of all Americans. This proud legacy is under threat from the choices you make in your budget. Looming over all of these issues are the ongoing investigations by the Special Counsel and now the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York into Russia's interference in our 2016 elections and possible collusion by the Trump campaign. Our country needs a full accounting of Russia's actions to undermine our democracy so that we can effectively work to prevent interference in the 2018 election and beyond. You and a small group of senior-level officials in the department stand at the nexus of ensuring the White House does not interfere further in these investigations. I am worried that the President's ongoing attacks on the department, in tandem with the retreat from some of the core missions of the agency, are doing a terrible disservice to the tens of thousands of DOJ employees at Main Justice, the FBI, and the DEA, and the ATF, and elsewhere. These individuals are committed to the hard and selfless work of serving and improving our nation. There is a real fear there, and throughout this nation, that many of the norms of our democracy are falling by the wayside, and that your agency's leadership is doing little to stop this decline. I look forward to discussing these issues with you today, Mr. Attorney General, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. You know that you and I have a very good relationship, but I can't help myself in your comment that we want to restore the rule of law. I just need to remind ourselves that the rule of law has to be in every state, in every territory, in every agency, and inside the White House, not just at the border. If we do it just at the border, then we would do a great disservice to the rule of law. Mr. Attorney General, recently, the department recently notified immigration judges that their job performance will be evaluated based on how quickly they close cases. I'm not aware of any court in the nation that has instituted this model of judicial evaluation, and this decision raises serious due process concerns. Can you name any other court or judges that have been subjected to quotas as a basis for their personal performance evaluations?
Mr. Serrano, we had
conferences with the judges, they agreed that metrics were appropriate for the Department of Justice to establish. The metrics that we established was 700 cases per year. It does not mean if you don't achieve that, you're fired. There may be good reasons why those caseloads are down, but we've got people doing over 1,000 a year, and we've got people doing less than 700 a year, which I think is around the average. So we'd like to see a certain degree of productivity. The taxpayers are not paying for people who don't perform every day. We need high-performing judges. I don't apologize for it. I think this is a reasonable standard or request or a metric for them to achieve. But certainly, if they have, when they're evaluated in their performance, that if they have good reasons for not meeting that goal, we would consider it.
Well, I'm certainly not going to change your mind. I just want you to remember what you already know, that on a daily basis, not a daily basis, but every so often we hear of cases where a person spent 20, 30 years in prison for something they didn't do. And so when you begin to pressure people, not you, but the department, to come up with results, to me the word judge, juez in Spanish, has the same meaning. It's a wonderful word that says that you will judge what the outcome shall be. And if that judgment takes a while, then so be it in a democracy. So I get worried about the fact the department's basically saying you must complete it by a certain time. I'm not running away from the fact that you need productivity, of course. And maybe productivity is more judges in certain cases to handle the caseload. But the idea of do it by a certain time, it's also touching on another subject, but it's also, I may be the only person who thinks gridlock is not a bad thing in Congress. You know why? Because there are countries where the budget is always on time. Somebody says the budget will be on time. When you have two parties, when you have philosophies, when you have a democracy, gridlock means people are trying to figure out what to do. It's the same thing here. Judges are trying to figure out what to do. It's a big caseload. And I just keep that in mind, that some people are worried that we may not do what we're supposed to do. In the issue with the legal orientation program, I'm glad that we seem to have made a change, which will be good for everybody. Has the contractor providing the LOP service provided DOJ with any data on other information on the cost effectiveness of the program? Can you please submit that information for the record? How will your planned cost-benefit analysis differ from what has already been done?
This is what I understand about that. We have asked them for various bits of information which has not been provided. They may well have provided the data you've mentioned. If we have it, we'll provide it to you. The program should help make the system work better. It costs $11 or so million a year, and we'd like to make sure it produces the results the taxpayers are paying for.
Thank you. On a local level, if I may, Mr. Chairman? I'm over the time? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. We'll come back. We'll come back.
Chairman, Mr. Attorney General, for years, many have looked to the department as a resource of last resort in addressing serious civil rights challenges involving law enforcement. This includes many in my hometown of New York, where we're still seeking justice in the death of Eric Garner. Just last week, articles emerged that civil rights investigators at the department are recommending charges against the officer involved in Mr. Garner's death, but the top department officials were not sure about whether to proceed. Will the department move forward on charges against the officer at fault for Mr. Garner's death, as recommended by investigators? And have you been briefed on this case, and what are your thoughts?
Thank you. We take these matters very seriously and have wrestled with quite a number of them, and I would just say that we intend to do the right thing as we're given the ability to decide on this matter. As an ongoing, and I'm not able to comment on ongoing investigations.
I understand. Let me just ask you a question because I'm not a lawyer and I don't understand some of these things. So the investigators are members of the department who recommend to the higher-ups, if you will, that there should be a proceeding. Is that what's going on now? Without getting into
In
an area that you
general,
can comment.
investigators investigate cases. They consult with the local prosecutors, state and federal, and decisions are made. Sometimes it can reach the level of main justice in Washington, and then whatever division, the criminal division or civil rights division, evaluates the evidence and can make a recommendation also.
Right. Thank you. Well, there are a lot of folks in New York and another place that would like to see some conclusion that speaks about justice, and you are the Justice Department, and I can tell you that at local, this is interesting, and I don't know if you know this, and if you probably do. Whenever there's a rally somewhere about justice, people don't denounce the Justice Department. They usually say, let's bring this to the Justice Department, because they feel they can get justice, they get fairness. And so keep that in mind with this and other issues, because your department is still seen as the place where folks at the local level, the have-nots in many cases, can have justice. That's
Thank you
important.
for sharing that, and we value that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's talk about something doesn't get much publicity these days, the border wall. The issue of eminent domain is going to come into play. People are going to be, I guess, forced to sell land or give it up or so on. Some people, like myself, claim the wall may never get built because it would take a long, long time to resolve those cases. How do you see that picture? What does the department think will happen? Because I hear, and I'm not familiar with Texas, but I hear just along the Texas area alone, the wall would take so much land that is privately owned now, and we in this country try not to force people out of their places.
Well, thank you. Of course, eminent domain is used by state, local governments for highways every day. This is, I believe, a critical matter of national security. We have certain properties on the border now, and that we may need more, but at this point, I don't believe there are any eminent domain cases that have been filed. So obviously, it's a possibility to protect the United States, and we certainly can't be prohibited from obtaining property at our border if it's necessary to defend the border.
Okay. Very briefly, I have just a few seconds left here. The big issue on the census is the citizenship question. The big question is, why are we asking this time if a person is a citizen? And for me personally, I am a little troubled, a lot troubled, since I was born in a territory in Puerto Rico, that it also goes on, possibility exists, that it will go on to say, are you an American citizen? And then say, give you a choice, born in the United States. We thought it was all the United States. Then it says, born in Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands, and so on. Why would you, first of all, why would you ask the question? And why would you separate the territories from the United States, if you will? I've spent a whole career, 44 years, telling people, and the chairman knows this, that the territories are part of the United States. And this question kind of allows for people to say, you see, those 10 million people, or whatever the number is, are not part of this country.
I'm not familiar with the territory part of it. I'll look at that.
It's a possible question. It's been already put in the box and so on, and I don't know how far they've gone with it. But please keep in mind that they don't ask you in the census were you born in Texas, were you born in California, were you born in New York, Florida. Why in the territory?
I will look at that. Fundamentally, we believe that it's helpful for the government to know the number of citizens in the country. I'm a bit baffled by the pushback that's received. It's one of a number of questions. It was on the census for many years. Then it's now on the survey census that's done periodically now, and not the 10-year census. So it will go back on that. Department of Commerce has put it on there. We're now, by the way, it's the last question on the list, I understand, but we're in litigation now. I'm not prepared to really discuss the details of it. Before we get started good, lawsuits have been filed, so we'll be going to court and defending the Department of Commerce.
Mr. Chairman, just a question. Was it you or was it someone else in the department who said, if you don't fill that question out, you'll still be counted?
Well, I think that's what the policy is on other questions that are not filled out. So I believe that would be so. And of course, you know that an answer on that question can't be used to prosecute you or anybody who's here unlawfully. And it's a statistical data informative question. But I do notice that if I suggested it because, as I understand it, you'll fill out a lot of questions before you get to this one. So if it scares somebody, they've already filled out most of it.
That's the
I don't see
problem.
any need for people to be concerned about it. Frankly, I think it's a perfectly normal thing to ask.
And I'll close with this. That's the question that a lot of people in this climate we're living today, these last X amount of years, with the immigration issue and the DACA children and everything else that is happening around immigration, the question of are you a citizen scares a lot of people into not. And we spent too many years convincing certain communities, I have, and many others, to fill the census form. And we're still saying that. But that question scares people because they don't know the motives behind it.
Well, we should.
And the other one scares me.
We need to convince more people to apply to enter the country lawfully and not come unlawfully, in my opinion.
That's absolutely true. Thank you.
I do. I want to thank the Attorney General for coming before us today. As we wrap up, I can't help but maybe sound a negative note again. You know, it's not something I enjoy doing, but it has to be done. I'm amazed at how many members of Congress goes to the House floor and single out some newspaper article that may indicate that some lady or some fellow somewhere misused improperly, on purpose or not on purpose, by mistake, $50 in food stamps. And that became a big, big, big issue. And yet what I keep hearing is that an investigation that may talk about collusion, an investigation that may talk about people in this government and in this country helping the Russians hack us and interfere with our elections and everything else that has come from that, that should be shut down, that should be put away, that should not grow anymore. And it just troubles me, but it shouldn't amaze me by now, in the years that I've spent in Congress, that some people go crazy over some things that we should pay attention to, but certainly want to make sure that person who took $50 somewhere and misused it in government funds gets the full extent of the law on their shoulders. But whatever happened over here with a foreign government interfering in our elections, well, that we should shut down as soon as possible. Thank you.
I know, Mr.